Because it's the
So I want to try and talk.
Yes, really bad.
Are you talking to me, Ben?
Everybody appreciates hearing from me. I'd like to recognize that the number of county clerks have increased. Welcome, sir. And lobby. Welcome, Michelle. I'm still talking, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, Daniel?
We are.
Seen that in the blooper reel. How long have we been live for?
About 10 seconds.
Okay. Everything done, everything going? For those of you wondering why we're a little late getting back online, it's because we have some preparation feedback that we will continue to work on. Committee, anyone have any thoughts or remarks they want to share before we kick back into our agenda? All right, seeing none, I think that would be a great time to have the county clerks come forward. And you got the short straw?
Just
Second case.
This
Is
camera.
it possible the audio is that somebody's online? Is that possible? So everybody can shut their mics off. It is coming from a computer. Yeah, so if it's coming from a computer, that would explain it. I've had this problem before.
Far in with the speaker
Could
and
be somebody in the
microphone.
audience too actually logged in.
I think it would have been already.
All right,
Do we have a camera on it?
Let's keep checking your mics and computers, but otherwise.
Cameras might
be the floor and have the clerks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the committee. My name is Malcolm Irvin. I'm the Platte County Clerk and also the president of the Clerks Association. I have with me Clerk Gonzalez, Clerk Freeze, Clerk Rimmer from Albany, Fremont, and Converse County respectively. We're here to talk about the importance of working with county clerks. And I need to start by thanking the committee, those who've testified online, LSO. It seems as though each time something's brought up, it ends with, but work with the clerks. The clerks seem to be part of every discussion when it comes to reapportionment, and there's good reason for that. I submitted a memo to your committee, Mr. Chairman. It talks about the benefit of working with the clerks is to hopefully limit splits. And before we go too much further, it's important to know what a split is. Within a precinct, not everybody in that precinct votes the same races. There's different ballot races that different areas of that precinct vote for. So, for instance, the first thing that I sent was a map of the Rollins area, outlier surrounding area. But then there's 21 ballots from the Carbon County Clerk just for election district 1-2. So these are 21 different ballot styles that exist in this single precinct. And so I'm asking you to put yourselves in the shoes of an election judge. Somebody walks up and says, I'm registered to vote on County Road 451, which is on the left-hand side of your map, just outside of Rollins. Where do I vote? What ballot do I get? And so if we were to draw up, or the legislature were to draw a boundary, let's say Road 451 was the boundary, that creates an additional split within this election district 1-2. And so these election boundaries, for these legislative districts, are not the only boundaries that we have to worry about. At the county level, we have school districts, fire districts, commissioner races. There's a number of different boundaries that really matter. And it's not just the legislative ones that we have to contend with. Something a little closer to home, I've included a map of the town of Wheatland, just as a possible scenario. If the Platte County Clerk weren't consulted before boundaries were drawn in Platte County, which I'm advocating for the Platte County Clerk, I hope he would be. Let's just say a boundary was drawn on I-25. It's a major landmark in our county. Seems like an easy line, but election district 1-4, in the upper left-hand corner, there's a single house on the north side of Hightower Road or Oak Street. And if there's a school district boundary, fire district boundary, cemetery district, whatever it may be, and Oak Street is the boundary, the southern boundary, all of a sudden a split has been created, but this house is the sole voter in that split. And so now we know exactly how that person who resides at that home votes. And so it's very important to talk to the clerks in your respective counties and work with us just to make sure these splits don't occur and just protect that privacy of vote that every citizen's entitled to. We've got some tremendous experience. I've never been through a reapportionment, and so I think your questions are better suited to be asked of Clerks Gonzalez and Freeze. But we're here to offer any expertise we possibly can, but thank you for including us, and we hope to continue that relationship as we go forward.
Since you were referenced Clerk Freeze and Clerk Gonzalez, any additional information or thoughts you have to the committee? Then maybe we can ask questions of all of you at once.
Mr. Chairman, Julie Freeze, Fremont County Clerk. And again, thank you. We've talked to you a number of times since the session about including the clerks. This will be my fourth redistricting. So yes, only 40. So anyway, I guess he did call me old. So I think a couple things to remember. We talked a lot about today about districts for the legislature and how you take the census blocks and how those work in. So census blocks are drawn on landmarks. So it would be great if they were all city streets, but sometimes they are 2-track roads. Still, I mean, the census sends to the county clerks the lines and asks us to go out and make sure cities haven't changed, lines haven't changed, annexations, de-annexations. We're to go through those the best we can to identify features. So I think they're getting better, but it's possible that we still might be looking at something that is not really matching up with a district. The other thing to remember is a census block is the amount of people that live there, but may not be registered voters. So when we're pulling in or pulling out a census block as you're working on it, maybe you say, wow, I can pull this one and I can get 20 more, and that's just exactly what we need. But maybe only 3 of them are registered voters, and now 2 of them don't vote and 1 does, and that pocket is now known how that voter votes. So it's really important, again, for the clerks, because we're going to look at those. As we pull them into our layer, we're going to look at how many registered voters we have in that district as well. And we may advise you that, okay, that's great for what you're needing to do, but this is what may happen by pulling them out of their area. And as he mentioned before, as Malcolm mentioned, the splits. So, and sometimes you see that on paper, it is hard to understand. I do have the county commissioner districts, as I mentioned. And I said it might be better if Fremont County stayed whole, but that's 4 legislators. And in my situation, I have 5 commissioner districts, so I'm still going to have those splits, even though I'm going to have to do both of them with the reservation in mind. In some of the areas that I do go and select from, I know there are Native Americans, but they're not in what people would technically call Native American districts. So it is important for us on the local levels to get a hold of your cities and towns, your commissioners, your legislators, your tribes, your parties. Those are all very important people for all of us as clerks to get a hold of those folks and invite them into to look at the maps and talk about the areas of interest. So those are a couple things that I just wanted to remind you of moving forward in the next redistricting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This is my 4th redistricting session. Also, I feel that in collaborating with the legislative bodies, as well as the different legislators, even the municipalities in Albany County, I have to and be concerned with wards within my county. Right now, I currently share a district with Carbon County, and I'm very fortunate just like the other clerks, that in working together, we can do what is best in the interest of the people that we serve, and feel that collaborating together, being a part of this process, and allowing us to offer our own ideas and suggestions, as well as collaborating with you, we work best on the front line and know really what the boundaries are and should work best with the people that we serve. Thank you.
Ms. Rimmer, and you're at the table, if you'd like to join in, or any thoughts? Not sure if we've had you before as corporations before.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the city. Karen Rimmer, I'm the Commerce County Clerk. This will be my first redistricting session, so I do not have any words of wisdom for anyone in the room. I'm really just here to learn and see how all this works. The only thing I would add that for Commerce County, Malcolm had mentioned the splits, just that, and I'm sure you all know this, but every county deals with those different kinds of splits of cemetery districts, hospital districts, whatever the case may be. So yeah, really, I'm just here to learn the process and appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Questions for any of the Clerks Association? Those of you new to redistricting, we will work extensively with the clerks. And every time we think we've made a really good decision, they will say, well, actually on this street, in this district, you're gonna do this, and you don't wanna do that. So I thought, it was a very amicable relationship 10 years ago. They have, their viewpoint, and we will try to accommodate appropriately and make sure that even if, what's the legal ramifications if it's apparent how people are voting? There's a statute, right, that we're not, but is there any other, besides the basic confidentiality vote statute? in
Well, I
place?
mean, that's federal law too, is that it's makes sense type of conversation to have. You don't want to set out somebody where you know how the vote is, because every person is, I think it's a constitutional thing, and I think everybody has a right to have a private ballot. And so I believe that we need to make sure that we're diligent in making the best efforts to not have that happen. Will it happen down the road? That has happened before, where an area maybe had several people, you do your redistricting and they move out and you're stuck with what you're stuck with, but we do everything we can to make sure that they are not in that direction. I think they could sue you saying, hey, this happened in maybe format, you don't want that running across the news. I think one other thing I wanted to add is that, with all the election integrity stuff that's been going on in the nation, and now it's kind of hit our state too, we will look at things, gerrymandering has been talked about a little bit here, but that's one eye that this group will not take. I mean, we've said that before in all of our visiting with you about bills. Our job is to say, how can we administer this election the best way we can? And we're going to continue with that. Where your seats are, probably know where they are in our county, where you live, but that is not going to be one of our concerns. So we may run up against, an area where we chop it off, and maybe that's not the district you're currently living in, and we're not going to look at it that way. So don't be surprised if we don't look at it that way, and just let you know that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The great thing about your county clerks is sort of we get the plan together in a big picture way, but they really do make it work. And then if you run into a problem, like Ms. Reese helped to, where there's a family compound that she was able to look at and to move boundaries, take a look from one, take a look, to make it so practical and work. And they're the only ones that can really do that. This is going to be easier than you think. I am very confident.
Other questions to the clerks? This time, thank you all for being here. And look forward to working with you. Lamb, welcome. I'm going to call you at this point.
Favorite closure? Am I on? It's Brett.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. For the record, David Fraser, Executive Director, Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Appreciate your time this morning. I want to begin by congratulating the committee on all the fun you're about to have with this. And I just want to, indicate that we're here for you as a resource to the degree that we can be. I don't think we're going to be the kind of resource that the county clerks are. And if anything, I think maybe we'll be a resource to them as much as to you. But we certainly want to help in this as we can. I don't really foresee us being highly opinionated about a lot of these matters, at least not on the record. So again, I think that though our role might be minor, I'd certainly like to be helpful wherever we can. With that, that's about all I have to say, Mr. Chairman, this today.
You get questions, Senator Scott?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that for your cities wards, you have to redistrict to get equal population on your city councils. Does anything we do and how we manage our data affect what you do, and are there any problems that you perceive?
Thank you, through the chair. I kind of have that same, Senator, I kind of have that same question myself about how that will play out. And I think that, as has been stated earlier, this will be as much of a learning experience for me as for anyone. This doesn't tend to be really a big municipal issue, other than, making sure that we don't have conflicts that would create, disproportionate representation or that kind of thing. We're agnostic as everybody formally is, but we're actually agnostic as regards to partisan issues, since our elections are nonpartisan. But I think that will be questions that I have as we go forward, and that I'll want to communicate with the clerks on, and make sure we don't muddy any of those waters. And I'm not sure if those have to coordinate per se. And I'm sorry, I don't. The short answer would be I don't know.
An issue we certainly dealt with 10 years ago was on compactness of the cities, when Rollins and Jackson come to mind specifically, that they strongly wanted one legislator to represent the city and town limits to the best that they could. As you might be aware, Rollins was divided into two for a decade, which helped balance, and Jackson was divided into 3.5. And they, I think, felt that sting and decided they wanted to have one district. As you can imagine, that necessitates much larger rural areas that fit the populations. And so I think that's, as a chairman moving forward, going to be an issue of concern, working with the cities and mayors on their thoughts. And that probably is dependent on each local municipality of if they rather have one legislator for just the city, or if they want to divide their city into, I think Douglas is divided in almost 3 right now in some portions. Some legislators and people have said that's really good, that they kind of have 3 legislators they can go to, and some have said that's really bad that we split Douglas into 3. So those are the questions that I know I'll be looking for answers for moving forward. Anyone else testimony for the Association of Municipalities? Go ahead.
Well, thank you. I know that wasn't a question, Mr. Chairman, but we've had that same discussion. All those thoughts that just rolled off your head are things that we've had. And for example, whether you split it, whether community split, and whether that's a better thing, or whether it's better if they're all there. We've thrown that around the bullpen a bit, and there seems to be good arguments both ways, as you kind of indicated. So, where usually we sit up here and say, well, as a group, here's our opinion. Here's our single opinion as a group. This may be a case where we're more of a resource to say, well, this is the way this community feels, and this is the way that. We'll try to do our best on that kind of communication, because I'm not sure all of our members will take the same approach.
It's great city. All right, seeing no further comment, and I don't know all the county commissioners. I do know Mr. Willis is right in front of me. Hi, Mr. Willis, from Converse County. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Willis, Commerce County Commissioner, but here President of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I listened to most of this morning's meeting and the audio was fine when the mics remember to be turned on. Senator Scott, we can hear you well, but thank you for the opportunity to be here. So a couple of things from a statewide perspective from the Commissioner Association, and a lot of it was alluded to this morning, is if you go with the regional concept, that's a really good way to engage the commissioners and the locals to looking at those communities of interest and those boundary questions that we need to help decide is, it's going to be very hard for commissioners and others to engage in the statewide plan. But if I heard some support, although not a decision yet on how you maybe go with that regional approach, and commissioners stand ready to be engaged in that process, because we do know the communities of interest, we do know the geographic features, and working with the clerks and our municipalities within that area to do with it. The challenge is, as you know, there are winners and losers in redistricting, and it was demonstrated this morning as you have to move population. And I think the best way to deal with that is as close as local as you can, so that those areas of interest and those ideas and philosophies are as closely aligned in the geographic areas you can. In some of those areas, it's going to be very difficult. We want to be engaged in that conversation, and we recognize that we're on a little bit of a time crunch. I think, as alluded this morning, had a lot more time last time because you had the numbers a lot earlier. The numbers are a little later here, but we recognize that, are willing to be engaged in that. But I do think overall we would support that regional concept, and the principles that you put forward this morning. However you determine where they are, we'll work with you to stay within those boundaries. The perfect example of the local is the question that just arose of whether you want more people representing you in smaller chunks or a bigger chunk. We do have 5 representing us right now, and at times that's really advantageous, and at times it doesn't work. It doesn't work as well. So it is. I think that's the local idea. If you want to be a donut, or if you want to be the pie slice, I think both of those are legitimate. But I believe those are definitely best in that regional concept. You can work together to see what works the best for you. I think the regions are the trickiest part, and the math kind of will dictate them some, but you've got the geographic area of the east that just gets huge by its definition. Senator Driscoll well knows the size of what the Northeast is to pick up enough people, and we've got some others. Representative Hunt, you represent a fairly large geographic area. So I don't think you have a solution for that, but again, if we're at the table with the clerks, we can help bring those solutions. We want to meet the deadlines, and we will work as hard as we can to do that. One other point that I know the clerks don't want me to say this, so I'm not trying to throw them under the bus by any means, but there are a couple of lines that can be moved at the local level, and that is the precinct lines. You can't move special districts, and you can't move school districts without some significant effort. But precinct lines have generally been changed at some level over each census for various and sundry reasons. And so getting that information up front so that if those precinct lines have to be moved to remove voter identification or to reduce split boundaries, that's a process that has time that the clerks do in consultation with the commissioners. If I remember the statute right, it's not a commissioners get to agree, but they don't really get to disagree on it because it is the clerk's thing, but it raises community concerns. Anytime you change precinct boundaries, same as legislative boundaries, there are people that feel disenfranchised or feel like they have won by being put in an area of interest. So that is one that, if the timing is right, can reduce the number of splits, but doesn't eliminate. And with that, Mr. Chairman, again, the commissioners stand as a resource, both as an association and individually at the county level, and I would stand for any questions.
Questions for the County Commissioners Association? What about Converse County? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Mr.
Good things are happening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So committee, I'm inclined to just continue with public comment for the next hour as we've grown in people, and then we can circle back on the plan and future meeting dates, etc. That's everybody's generally nodding. So Mr. Correnti, if you'd like to go next, come on down. And we do have some people online as well that I'll add sporadically, sporadically throughout the meeting. But the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Joey Crane. I'm the chairman of the Wyoming Republican Party Statewide Redistricting Committee, co-chair with former Representative Scott Clem. former Representative Flynn apologizes that he cannot be here today. I want to start by recognizing our staff from the LSO, because all the hard work we're seeing the committee do today is even harder and longer work done by them. And every good or bad idea that comes out of these meetings is another few hours of work they're going to have to do. So I'm going to try to keep your workload minimum while I engage the committee. As a representative of the majority voice within the Republican Party, I don't want anybody to think here that I'm testifying on behalf of every registered Republican in the state. That would be ridiculous. We know for a fact there's Republicans in this room that would never let me speak for them. There's Republicans on this committee that would never let me speak for them. What we are planning to bring forward is a posture, not an entire plan, mostly an equation that leans back towards the original constitutional language, because we have found issues with the judicial relief for Article 3, Section 3, and my colleague will be presenting that spreadsheet and breakdown later. What I would like to speak to today is the reason why we're leaning that way, and hope that, and from what I've heard today, there is a lot of interest in leaning towards a county line focus. And I very much appreciate Senator Driscoll and Senator Nethercott's comments earlier of, it's obvious that that's what we're going to try to do. We can only do so much. But it is something we're going to stand hard on. And if eventually we get closer over the next couple of redistricting phases, by the time I'm in here, as long as Senator Scott, then I'll consider it a win. But the bottom line is that the judicial relief granted in Article 3, Section 3, saying the legislature may disregard the provisions of this section, do not automatically relieve the legislature of their responsibility to draft a resolution and attempt to amend the Constitution to embrace that judicial relief. And I think that for the process of redistricting, it's acceptable. You, as legislators and the legislature itself, can get away with that and never have to worry about going to court, or if you do go to court, losing. There are other provisions of the Wyoming Constitution that are negated, namely the voice and the control of government by the people. We have never been given the opportunity to say, we have seen the resolution to amend the Constitution of the state of Wyoming based on the judicial relief granted, and we get to say no. And then it's a problem. What I prefer to do is have the committee ask the LSO to draft that resolution, and through the process of redistricting and in your session next year, actually have that presented to the people. I would be willing to accept that it would appear on the same ballot that the results of redistricting would appear on, given the fact that the people would have the opportunity to vote up or down on it. And I say that because a lot of people have misinterpreted the party's position. And I've read some online blogs that said, we're looking to reduce the size of government. We're the Republican Party. Of course, we're looking to reduce the size of government. But we prefer, if government's going to stay the same size or grow, it does so through the wording of the actual Constitution of the state of Wyoming. So the plan we presented with the numbers started with one senator per county as a baseline, not as a mandate. And of course, it doesn't mean that every county has to have the same number of senators. But I think through the discussion I've heard here today, efforts will be made to get as close to that as possible. So the next step would be doing things like making sure that the people have a chance to vote and do that referendum on a constitutional change. So this is never a conversation we have to have again. Subsequently, with the county commissioner's testimony that just came up, there is a concern that we have state statutes that exist standing against the principle of one person, one vote that's cited under Article 3, Section 3. And I'll give you an example. The way the Title 22 provisions precinct committee men and committee women for the parties, whether that's a legitimate function of government or not, I'm not going to argue. But the fact is, both of those provisions in Title 22, Chapter 4, 101, B and C both state shall have no less than one. So if we have a principle based on the supremacy clause that applies to redistricting, it should apply equally across all of our legislation and our Constitution. So I think other things need to be addressed. Another thing would be the fact that Title 22 actually gives the authority, as was just mentioned, to county commissioners through the clerks to change precinct lines without any oversight, direct ask, or permission from the legislative body, which could ultimately change a legislative district line enough to affect the population within that district to actually be in violation of the one person, one vote principle without any oversight by the legislature or the ability to draw that back in. There is no direct ask and there is no mandate that they clear with you. Now, I trust a lot of the clerks in the state. I haven't met all of them, so I don't know, but I have developed a pretty good relationship with the new president of the Clerks Association. I have all the faith and confidence that they would do the right thing and make sure that you guys are involved and that the entirety of the legislature is involved. But there's nothing on paper compelling that to happen. So the concerns that the Republican Party sits with is some of these things are incomplete, some of these things are concerning, but I think we're all headed in the right direction. Right now, my committee is set up in several districts across the state. I looked at Senator Scott's redistricting regional plan. I am willing to redistrict my committee to fit your regions if you would like to have representatives on the ground as key stakeholders outside of the clerk's office or the county commissioners. I implore our counterparts in the Democrat Party to do the same, because what's really going to happen when it comes down to the nitty-gritty fingers, lines, and what street that line falls on, it's going to be the voice of the people. My number one job is not to always bring the people's voice to you, but to bring them to the right seat so they can tell you themselves, because you need to know that there is a consensus for some of these plans. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions, committee, Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Could you help me with how you say your last name? I'm sorry.
That's Correnti, but I've been called other things
No, I want to
by
say,
people on this committee.
Mr. Correnti, thank you. So you mentioned that you think the county commissioners could change the legislative districts by changing the precinct lines. Is that what I understood?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, there is a provision within statute that when some precinct lines are changed, depending on where a legislative boundary is, it either creates an additional split, or because there's lack of oversight in some of the systems, now that we're getting more digital, it's less likely to happen. But when that precinct boundary moves, if it's on the, I would say, inside edge of an urban area, you could effectively move a legislative district by moving a precinct line unknowingly.
Mr. Chairman. Yes. So we don't build legislative districts based on precincts. They kind of, we try not to split precincts, but it could happen. They are independent. So you cannot change a legislative district by moving a precinct. The legislative districts will be specified in the bill that we propose, no matter what happens with precincts after that. It just can't happen.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, thank you for letting me know. I'll look at that again, and I believe, I would hope that you're right, and I just made a freshman error. I appreciate it.
So, and,
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, just follow up. Also, with respect to one person one vote, you mentioned the connection with the statute that says that each precinct should have at least one committee man and one committee woman. You're kind of making a connection with that's a violation of one person, one vote. I think you were using that as an argument to say that there could be other violations. Is that what I understood right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, not that there would be or could be other violations, but if there is a legislative principle, which is what the one person, one vote has been described as repeatedly, including the presentation this morning, a principle should be applied equally across all portions of the Constitution and statute. So even if there's one instance where the wording we're trying to avoid, which is shall have no less than one if we do county lines, it shouldn't exist anywhere else in our statutes. Because personally, and through the consensus of the State Central Committee, which authorized me to testify here today, that would be an associated violation in the statute based on the judicial relief granted to Article 3, Section 3.
So, Senator Case, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I kind of push back that on that a little bit. The organization of parties and party elections is kind of a separate animal from the primary elections, a separate animal from general elections. Some have said, why should the state even hold elections for parties? So it's kind of in a weird space of being a public election and not being a public election. We don't tell the parties how many people they have to have or how many people they can do, except for they have at least one committee man. It's one of this tenuous areas where political parties, government elections overlap. So I think it might be an exception, but I don't think you want the state regulating parties. Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Once
Senator
you're-
King,
Go ahead.
I agree that we don't want state government or state statute regulating the parties, but unfortunately they do. In fact, Title 22 has an entire chapter dedicated to major political parties, which has over 30 provisions within it and almost 20 sub provisions detailing what those provisions are. It's interesting to me that in the quote unquote equality state, there is a subsequent chapter for minor political parties. And there's only 7 rules, mostly restricting the government from what they do to the parties, not what the party has to do. So I would agree that they shouldn't. And I'd be happy to work with this committee in the future and making sure that that is the state's position through statute. But I would have to say, I disagree with you in the state statute definitely does tell the parties how many they can have. And it's provisioned by 250 votes for the party's candidate in the US House race every general election. So I'm sorry, but I disagree. And I think that if we have a legislative posture based on a principle, the content of statute represents what that posture is. And right now I see it in conflict between Article 3, Section 3 and Title 22, 4-101.
Just guess that's because the U.S. Supreme Court has said one man, one vote overrules even the Wyoming state constitution among several of their opinions. They did. So I mean, our statutes are somewhat out of date with our constitution, which is not what we follow in many cases because of the U.S. Supreme Court. I think that works now.
In your question, so I think the state does have an interest in some aspect of parties and party government. We want party elections to be fair. We want to follow rules because you want the parties to be representative of the people that voted. So it's kind of a tenuous thing. It's a give and take. But clearly, we'll get into it, I suspect later, but there are cases, it's Reynolds versus Sims and Schaefer versus Thompson, that both said we overrode Article 3, Section 3 of the Wyoming Constitution. It's not, those are state Wyoming court cases, those are federal court cases.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, I would agree with you that those are judicial relief, but there are no provisions within our Constitution granting the judiciary the right to automatically or unilaterally amend our Constitution, which is why my ask of the committee is draft the resolution to have the Constitution amended to say whatever that judicial decision was as the language of our Constitution to negate this argument in the future. And then we won't have to worry about the specific wording of one person, one vote existing in our chief governing document conflicting with what Title 22 says, and that can be a different issue altogether. So what ultimately it comes down to is there is a legislative responsibility that is inherent in reacting to a judicial decision. And that is not just saying, hey, we got a hall pass from a judge, we don't have to worry about it. It's we need to take this judicial decision, put it into practice, produce something for the people to vote on if it's a constitutional amendment, or change our state statutes to reflect that judicial decision so that we're no longer in conflict and our laws and our Constitution actually reflect the actions we're going to be taking in the future.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So you would argue that if we put a resolution to the people implement what the federal law, federal courts have said, if they disagree with that, then that would negate the federal courts?
It would put us in a position where we would expect our representatives, sorry, Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, I believe it would put us in a position where the representation of the people of Wyoming would have to represent the voice of the people of Wyoming. Article 1, Section 1 clearly states where the power of government lies, and I'll give you an example. Our friends to the south in Colorado are in blatant violation of the Supremacy Clause. Their legislature put a vote to the people to decide whether they wanted to be state-sanctioned drug dealers in violation of federal law. The people said yes. The state, even though the legislators that disagreed with it, were in a position where they had to defend the voice of their people. I understand it might be unpalatable. I understand it might be inconvenient. I understand it might bring legal action that will further attempt to overturn other things. And, you know, it's a big problem. But fundamentally, to embrace our Constitution And the first thing our Constitution says, which is all powers inherent in the people, and there are certain responsibilities when it comes to amending or granting relief to provisions of our Constitution, I think would be the appropriate step, yes, even if the people say no.
And the next is for, I mean, I guess then just the timeline. I mean, we have this 3 months. We don't have time for constitutional amendments for this plan. I mean, in the future, I agree, but for purposes of getting redistricting done with a plan roughly by December 1st, general bills are due also to get them finalized for session. I guess let me ask, what do you think is possible in our current statutory framework in a redistricting sense?
I believe Mr. Chairman, I believe I testified earlier that I understand we're on a calendar, and even if everything goes perfectly, the new redistricting plan, whether it's constitutional or judicially covered, is going to appear on the same ballot if this resolution comes through both chambers and ends up on the ballot. There's no way to change that. I was very happy to see and hear many of the members today speak to the posture they want to take. I would love to see that play out in actual action in the developing of the redistricting plan and their work on the floor. If the efforts continue to be made, the Wyoming Republican Party is here to work with the legislature. And yeah, we have a goal. Do we expect to win the whole game by 100% the first time out? No. We'd like to see the effort made. We're not going to concede any of our principles, but we will understand the timeline, and we will continue to work with you as much as you're willing to work with us. So I don't think we're hanging an axe over the legislature's head and saying, do it now and get it done right the way we want it. We want to show that we also have skin in the game. We understand there's constraints, but as representatives of the large majority of the people in Wyoming, we also have expectations.
Representative Blackburn. Any other questions? Crunchy, seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Miller, do you want to just run this time? Is that okay? Come on down.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman, Senators, and House members.
Okay. Yep. All right. Sorry. Thank you, Senator, or Chairman, Senators, and Representatives for wanting to speak here today. Do you all have a copy of the briefing slides that
I believe we do.
Okay.
For the record, you give us your name.
Yeah, Brian Miller, the Sheridan County Chairman of the Republican Party, and I've also am here, as a citizen as well. I'm a part of the committee again that Chairman Corianti is. I'm a member of that committee, and I had come up. We talked about this at a meeting that we had in general, and I had come up with a basic plan. And it's not necessarily a plan; it's more of an equation to try to get an idea of how to go about this. And what you'll note as we go through it, there's specific items that help us meet the state requirement, and you can either meet it one of two ways. You can either meet what's in the Constitution and kind of ignore the hall pass that we have and go through the process that Ms. Corianti went through, saying how we resolved that in Wyoming, because so far we've just kicked that every 10 years. We kick it down another 10 years. 91 was when all this stuff happened. 30 years later, we still haven't changed it. At some point, it should be changed. Or we're keeping it in there because we think the Supreme Court didn't get it right. When you look at the U.S. House and Senate, we do have two senators. So we don't have that broken up equivalently there. And I know they say that the counties aren't separate. I've read all the information that they've provided and a lot more. And while that may be the case, that is the way that the states are broken down as entities. They're broken down in counties and they're broken down in municipalities. And that falls along all the lines that several of the other people today suggested. So it makes sense to keep those lines in there as much as possible, if not entirely, which I think we can do. So what I've done here is gone through and put the basis of the Wyoming constitutional authorities for what you're doing. And you see there we have the preamble, of course, in Article 1, Section 1, Article 2, Section 2, and Article 1, Section 3. Those are all specific, and you all have talked about those as well. We talked about Article 3, Section 3, which has the hall pass, I'll say, for that. And we need to decide if we're going to keep ignoring that section completely. And then
No, I'm sorry, just wanna make sure. When you say completely ignore that section, you mean follow the U.S. Supreme Court
I
5-time reiterated standard of one minimum vote?
yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Specifically on the Senate side. Because it seems like that would apply to the US Senate as well. And they say it doesn't. Well, we believe it does. And it makes more sense because we have mirrored our government to be like that of the United States. So that's why I would say that part would be ignored.
Just want to make sure now when you say we, you mean the Sheridan County Republican Party, you mean the redistricting committee, Republican Party. I just want to know who's speaking.
Yeah, the redistricting committees we've been talking.
Okay. You go, thanks.
Like I said, we have been authorized to come in and speak on this. So going through the rest of the data there, Mr. Chairman, but the state census talks about what we need to do with that. And I'll go on to the page that matters. The first page that matters. And what we have here, the numbers that I used in here were not the numbers that came out yesterday. Why? Because I haven't enough for them. So we do have new numbers. But those numbers, from the numbers that I have on here, there's about 4,000 people different across the state. 13 the county numbers are down with the new numbers that just came out, and 10 went up. And of those, half of those are in the lowest number of counties, or the smallest of the counties that we have here. So when you look at what I've put together here, it really simply is an equation. You can plug in multiple things. You'll see that on the last page, where it says additional examples. What we have here is the current number. What's in blue, you have the current number of state representatives broken down by the number that are entirely within a county versus those that are shared with a county. And the same thing with the
Question, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hmm?
Mr. Miller,
yes.
I just have a question
Sure.
because down on Goshen County, you go across and it says currently we have 3 shared representatives, 1 unshared. And then you keep going over in senators, you say 2 shared, 2 unshared, or 0 unshared. They're actually 2 shared. They're 2 and 2.
It's two, yeah, exactly. It's 2. What it's saying is the total number and the number that are shared. So there's 3 with 1 of them being shared, and 2 with none of them being shared.
No, that's the opposite. Same with the senators. That's why I'm confused, because the senators, we have 2 senators and they're both shared. 1 senator has Goshen, Niobrara, and Weston, and the other senator has Goshen and Laramie. So I'm confused by the numbers. If you just let me know later.
These are the counties that are shared. So yeah, there are 2 counties that share that position.
We'll work, yeah,
Bottom
we'll
line-
give them out.
Bottom line, yeah, the math, we can skip it. Basically, what this ends up doing is when you take the math out there, what I've done is I've just created straight across the board with 23. You have to go to the next page to get it, because I couldn't get it all on the same slide easily. You have 23, 1 for each county. And we had looked at this in the Republican Party as well when we were looking at our the number of individuals that we send to our national convention. We were trying to get every county as a single, an individual, and then divide up the rest of them amongst the counties that had more populace, which is effectively what this was attempting to do, except for the fact that for senators, we're trying to get the 1 per. If you have the 1 per, you know that the statute says you have to have 2 times the number of representatives. So if you have 23, you have to have 46. If you end up having 46, you got to have at least 92. If you have 92, and you go with the maximum number you can have, you have 138. That's a lot of representatives. So we don't recommend going down that road. But the idea here is to keep the same general apportionment or percentage per county of representation by going with these lower numbers. This is if you went with the 23 and only 2 times the number of representatives. What does this ultimately end up doing for Wyoming? For Wyoming, we have, the Constitution is effectively adhered to, even though we've been told that we can ignore that statement. I would like to see that actually go back in front of the Supreme Court, because I don't think that should exist when it comes to the Senate of the state of Wyoming, or any other state for that matter, because we should be able to mirror the national, the way that our federal government is set up. Each county can have their own senators and representatives, which is exactly what we say we want, or what is in the Constitution right now. It would eliminate sharing of legislators between counties, which would certainly help when it comes to campaigning, when it comes to the county clerks having to deal with areas outside of their own areas, with the sharing that goes on between counties and split counties. It would help with that. It would streamline elections and provide candidates and the clerks clarity on what areas they need to actually be out there working in. And the big thing that it ends up doing is it helps with the vacancy complications. As we all know, there's at least one representative, I believe, that has 5 counties. There's a Senate. It has 5 counties that they are in, and if that vacancy ends up occurring, they have to go to 5 different counties, and they have to actually have that vacancy go to 5 different county commissioner boards to get that square up. And that's pretty significant, and this would help reduce that as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hunt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Miller, looking at your chart here, kind of looking towards the center of it, but I think I count 6 counties, starting with Uinta down to the Black, that currently have more than one representative who, under this new proposal, would be dropped to 1. And I was just curious what the, I guess first off, if any of the members of the party's redistricting committee are from those counties, and just in general, what the thoughts are of those folks in potentially losing a representative or a district.
Okay, so in this, Mr. Chairman, Representative Hunt, what this is of course talking as we go with the baseline, what the minimum the Constitution says. As you'll see on the last page, I go beyond that and show you some other solutions that kind of help resolve that issue, but still only having 1 senator per county. And that's the very last page that you would have gotten. And that's where I would eventually want to get to.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Nethercott.
just a quick question. At the time the Constitution was written, when you're referring to, how many counties there were in the
That's good. I think we had 5 or 6, I think, at the time. And we still, as a state, we have very few counties compared to most states. You look at Iowa with 98, I believe. It's a lot smaller. Well, bigger.
Representative Hunt, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess just speaking for myself, I mean, I totally understand the frustration, because I represent the smallest county in the state. And I fully sympathize with the fact that it is very difficult for them to obtain a representative or a senator that is going to model under the current boundaries that they are gone. That being said, they did have a representative from there for 18 years, did a very good job. Actually, he was a Democrat, one of the most conservative areas of the state. Wonderful human being. But anyway, so I totally understand and sympathize with where you're trying to go with this. That said, okay, so let me throw this out there. Have you considered the other way, going the other way with it? Because we've said within the Constitution, can be no less than half, no more than 3 times, or no more than whatever, no less than 2 times, no more than 3 times. If you were to keep the number of senators currently, just hypothetically, and you go from 60 to 90, then obviously you shrink the populations within each House district, which in theory would give more of those smaller counties a better shot at having at least 1 representative. Have you considered the possibilities of that.
Actually, we'll be getting to that, as a matter of fact. It's not exactly with the 30 in the Senate, but certainly going to 3 times the number in the House. And I can get to that if you like. So.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So the last thing is, bottom line, we need to size our government appropriately and within our Constitution. And if there's an issue with the Supreme Court saying there's something wrong with our Constitution, we need to fix it one way or another. We need to make it so this doesn't become an issue, because this is an issue for smaller counties. It's brought up all the time. Every time I go out and talk to counties, they bring it up. And you look at that. Well, I'll just skip that for now. Just go on to answering your question, Representative Hunt. When you look at the last page, we're like we said, we're not looking specifically to say we could minimize. We can go to 23 and 47. I know in the biggest world, that would be great. When has anyone ever shrunk government like that? And starting at the top, that would be an outstanding thing. But we don't think that's necessarily going to be the case either. So I just threw a couple of other examples in here, still trying to keep the number low. So if you went with the 23 meaning 1 per county, so everyone has their own, and you went 46, you saw what that was. And those numbers are here. And the percentages, which I have more graphs and charts, and shows that those percentages on the percentage by population representation, they're all very close. They're well within the plus or minus 5% when it comes down to it. If you extended that to 59, just to throw a number in there that's close to where we are today, the 60, so you don't lose any House seats effectively. This is where the numbers would come out. And when you look across on the left hand, or on the current reps, it's the same numbers as before. Even if it's a little confusing, you have about the same number of representatives in every county that we have right now. If you went to 23 and 54 or 59, the only difference would be, I think, at Sheridan County, we actually drop one in our county, which I'm sure folks back home beat me up a little on that. But to get back to where we should be, that would be good. So if you go with 69, the thing that you could end up doing is showing when you have to show a reason for here's what we have. We could go back and say, hey, we do want to keep it within the county boundaries. If you go at 23 and 69, you actually keep it within the county boundaries. You get down to that 8651 number, which is a little lower than the 9,000 number that we have here. But you can see that only you end up having 5 counties under the current numbers that are actually below that 86 for representatives. So while we might not have that in the Senate, and I think we can argue that the U.S. Senate is set up that way, so the state is trying to be set up that way in our legislature, we could match it with the House by going with 23 and 69. So we're not setting a specific number. We're just trying to say that there are ways to meet the constitutionality, or at least go back and fix the Constitution to align. We just like to see it happen so that this does not end up becoming a continual argument in the future. And it has every 10 years, it's brought up, we argue this, and then we move on. Let's find a way to fix it. And I think this, the 23 and 69 could even be a simple way to go ahead and resolve it by arguing that we want our government to be formed the same way as the U.S. Constitution, which is the way we set it up.
Senator Gates.
Sure, thank you very much. I really do appreciate that argument. I've heard it before that the states are just miniature versions of our United States federal constitution. We can align our states in a similar manner. Upper house and lower house, and upper house is based on population. I think that it sounds good, but it has failed at every single level. And it also fails at very practical. We've got counties now. We've got Niobrara with just a little bit over 2,000. And we've got Laramie County, which now it's pretty historic to have Laramie County with over 100,000 people. That's astounding. That's a big milestone in our history. Well, I always remember that. So if you had both of those counties, and you had the same number of senators for both of those counties. Now, I'm sure that Laramie County would be aptly represented with Senator Nethercott, and she could handle it. But the weight of the senator from Niobrara County, who would be elected with 1/50th of the population, meaning that the proportion of their votes and their influence are similarly of the same proportions, meaning that citizen of Niobrara County has a senator. The person in Cheyenne has to, it takes 50 more people in Cheyenne to exercise the same influence. I think that falls apart on its face. It's not practical and it's not fair. I'd be happier if we were approaching this whole thing by backing into changing counties, because counties need to change. We can't do it, but we can't do it. It's not here. The courts have ruled that the reason the United States Senate exists as a two per state is because it's in the United States Constitution. It's not in the United States Constitution that the state of Wyoming gets to have an upper house that's not population based. In fact, the United States Constitution now has, for a long time they debated about whether the Constitution even applied to the states. And then there was, I'm getting out here a little bit, but there were judicial decisions, and most importantly, probably the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which says now that states, you have to do this according to the constitutional dictates. It doesn't grant an exception for our upper house. And the Wyoming, I'm just going to read this at the Wyoming Supreme Court. They look and they say, it's Article 3, Section 3. It says the first issue before the court is whether, as plaintiffs contend, Section 3 of the Wyoming Constitution requires the legislature to redistrict legislative districts in a manner which honors established county boundaries. The Wyoming Supreme Court has held that the constitutional interpretation is governed by essentially the same rules as those governing statutory. Besides Powers versus State, that's a Wyoming case. Option state lands. And it cites it says the cases of constitutional interpretation approach shall be primarily guided by the intent of the drafter. Because the Wyoming Supreme Court has explained the primary principle underlying interpretation of constitution or statutes is that the intent is a vital and essential part of the law. The object of construction is applied to written constitution is to give effect to the intent of the people and adopted in the case of written law. Is the intent the law therefore to be informed. So the first step in determining the intent of the drafters is to assess the plain and unambiguous language of the portion of the Constitution. The intent must be found in the instrument itself. It goes on. And so it says the plain and unambiguous language of Article 3 of the Wyoming Constitution requires a proportion based solely on county lines. It doesn't stop here. It says it does not require the legislature to do its best to minimize county spending, as the claim suggests. However, while Article 3, here's the key point, of the Wyoming Constitution requires a proportion based on county lines, the United States Supreme Court has made it clear that equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States requires that both houses of a bicameral state legislature be apportioned substantially on a population basis. That's the United States Constitution, or the Supreme Court talking. It's not any court in Wyoming. And they're saying that that matters even if we have a vote. And even if the people say, we stand up for this again and again and again, they can vote 100 times. It's still unconstitutional. The court, so we have Schaefer versus Thompson. That's a U.S. Supreme Court case. Then the court in Reynolds explained, simply stated, an individual's right to vote for state legislators is unconstitutionally impaired when its weight is in its substantial fashion diluted when compared with the votes of citizens living on other parts of the state. Your plan exactly does that because it takes Niobrara and gives those people 50 times more representation and more power in their votes than for Laramie County. This just falls apart on its face. And you guys, why do you waste our time with this? Why do you waste your time? You just need to stop.
Chairman, if I may answer that. Yeah, center case, I've read through all that as well, and I understand what you're saying, and I see you're getting a little angry, and that's fine, because you think we're wasting your time. We're not wasting your time here.
Oh, well, I guess that would be our decision.
That is a true statement.
Okay, but go ahead.
So what we are saying here is that well, I'll say this, the Supreme Court does not decide policy. It just doesn't. There is a way to come back toward where our Constitution says that meets the level of scrutiny based upon all of the exceptions that are in the same documents, or the same document the LSO handed out earlier that has those things. There are exceptions for region, there are exceptions for business, there are exceptions, all kinds of exceptions that we can then be putting in there for the state of Wyoming. Like I said, there are only 5 counties that have less than 8,600 people that would be in there. And when it comes to the US Senate, and yes, it's in their constitution. Well, it's in our constitution too. It says Wyoming will match our way the way the US Senate does. So the 14th Amendment, it went for 100 years effectively the way it was. And in 91 it changed. So it changed because of an interpretation of the 14th Amendment, which may not have been right in this case. So why do we not change the law to make it more clear for people, so we don't have this behind the scenes argument between smaller counties and larger counties, which we all know we do? Why not fix that, or at least go back and say, okay, we're going to do this, see who ends up suing us, and see how they sue us, why they sue us, and see if we can't match the way the U.S. Constitution sets up the U.S. government, because we set up the Wyoming government the same way. Not we, but our forefathers set that up the same way. And so I understand what Senator Case you're saying, but there's no reason to ignore a piece of the Constitution and just keep pushing it off and pushing it off. Let's do something about it. It's not that painful to write the draft up. You've got a staff that can do that. They can write it up, they can get it put out there, and we see what the people in Wyoming say. People ignore often the Supreme Court, and states ignore Supreme Court rules. The federal government, the White House right now is ignoring Supreme Court rulings.
So as long as I'm chairman of this committee, we're not going to ignore U.S. Constitution.
Understood.
Article 6, section 2, we can talk 1803 Margaret versus Madison. My political science red flags that I teach are going off. Oh, but and I'm going to say something.
Just one more point.
One more approach. Sure.
So the reason we can do things differently in the United States for the Senate and the House is because it's in the United States Constitution. It's there. The 14th Amendment and other application of the United States Constitution is upheld one person, one vote. No matter what our Constitution says, no matter what we change it to it, you can't blatantly have a voter in Niobrara County have 50 times the power of a voter in Laramie County. You cannot do this. We have to try to get the voting power to be equalized. That's our job.
Anyone else? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for the presentation.
Very welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Public comment still open. Anyone else? It's just getting warmed up. Let me look online. Is Ms. Herman, League of Women Voters, still patiently waiting? I don't know if you can tell Ms. Creech, I don't have co-host access anymore. Do we have anyone in the waiting room which wishes to speak?
It does not appear that way, Mr. Chairman.
Or Representative Washington, have a good day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Representative Washington.
Right. Any other public comments on where they wish the committee would go? The rest of you are just here to enjoy popcorn. Okay. Committee, let's go back to the plan we have moving forward of what we would like to see. I think you're all aware we have a corporations meeting September 2nd and 3rd, currently scheduled for Sheridan County. Unless we have a Zoom meeting, I don't believe we're going to come together as a committee before those 3 weeks. So my hope for the rest of the meeting today is to take some action steps on what we hope to have at that meeting. We have half a day scheduled to talk about redistricting as part of our normal corporations meeting.
It's my hope that we encourage members of the public, members of this committee, other legislators, interest groups, etc., to potentially bring very rough rudimentary plans at that point. Let me double check with LSO on when we believe Maptitude will have the data incorporated and when a public portal might be available. We know.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think it's two separate questions. I think we 2 weeks out or a week now out. Yeah, but first on the public portal, committee just needs to vote on whether we're going to have one ready for first. And then Michael can answer when Maptitude's going to have.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we actually received an email today that we can begin downloading the Maptitude compiled information once we get back to the office as well.
So you believe then we would have some functionality, at least LSO, with our, what, 4 current licenses? Some of us would have functionality starting as early as next week, maybe if we live in Cheyenne, to be able to come in and start working on maps. And that be a correct assessment? And when might a public portal be able to be instituted then?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that we have to review, make sure that we're getting all the appropriate information. But I believe by the end of this week, we'll know what if all the information that we received from Aptitude. In terms of the public portal, in discussions with the, excuse me, with our representative from Aptitude, we have to define what layers we want in there. So whether it's the blocks, voter tabulation districts, other non-census layers such as school districts, so forth. And then they will assist us in loading that into the system. And a portal itself will be hosted by LSO if we go down this road. And getting it set up, they said, is a matter of days, not weeks.
Maybe, Senator Case, go ahead.
Thank you. Oh, now I got it.
Get up with 5 on at once.
Okay. In terms of what we're talking about with respect to a public portal and what we did last time, could folks help me with that? Maybe Director Obrecht. I was at one time thinking that we had a totally public portal, but I don't think we actually did. I think plans were basically sponsored by legislators is what happened. Am I right on that? Because I think that might be more manageable.
But Mr. Chairman and Senator Case, you're exactly right. Last time we didn't have a public portal where the public could submit their own build or redistricting plans. What they would do is work with the legislator who would then contact LSO, and we would then publish those plans on our website. But the plan viewer we had 10 years ago, and which we'll have this time, has the same functionality as a public portal. You can go break it down and see the line to the census block level, pick what layers you want. The main difference, the only difference, is you can't physically then move a line and it won't retabulate on that plan.
But you could do a manual thing at that point, couldn't you? I'm so sorry, Mr. Chairman. So you could say, what if we drew it in this neighborhood, and then you could do the math on the side? It wouldn't necessarily produce a plan.
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right. You could do that, just as Senator Scott has mentioned. And then you could have your representative request that different plan if you wanted it. It would be then published on the website.
It might be easier to manage if we kind of go this route.
So the open discussion about, I guess, having a public portal, I think we're on agreement to have one, but discussion of how you think it might work with Senator Driscoll and the budget.
Mr. Chairman, I go the different route. But first, I was trying to ask for what's it cost roughly, and I know, but I want the public to know what it's going to cost us. Go the public portal route. Start with that.
Mr. Albert, you know?
Yep. Mr. Chairman, it's $40,000.
That being said, I think it's affordable. I think for LSO staff time, I'd rather see us let them develop their own plans, bring it through a legislator, rather than nonstop having you guys run spreadsheets to try to match things up. I think they can sit at home, draw it up, get what they want done, and bring it to the legislator and do it. Because what we did before, and I burned a lot of your staff time before, you just sat at home and did exactly that. And you went, pulled up the lines, you did your hand figures. Came back to LSO and said, draw us a map, and you guys used staff time. I want your staff time to be used actually doing redistricting plans. Guys want to draw whatever they want, whether it makes sense or not. I just assume they could sit down and draw it up to the best of their ability, and then we can sit down and talk about it with the legislator. That to me makes the most sense. I believe they were talking about 100 users at a time to do it.
Mr. Chairman, it's 50 at a time.
50, okay.
That's
That's going to allow a lot of latitude, and I think a lot of people will find out rapidly if they can get on how frustrating it is to actually make things match on regional level. But we spent a lot of time. I burned a lot of your time at meetings. Tracy Hunt got a little more, but bringing plans for hand-drawn plans to you that we argued out rather than having an actual plan that snapped in. So my thoughts would be go with letting them go ahead and do what they want, bring it to sponsorship.
Reverend Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question goes along those same lines. I know we have a budget. If we end up doing, because we're not obviously going to be able to travel as extensive as we have in the past. So if we optimize our time using Zoom technology, as well as we meet locally and such, what is our budget and would this fit in without having to ask for any money?
Mr. Robert, we got 40,000 sitting around.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, so 2 years ago in the feed bill, you appropriated $250,000 for the redistricting effort. Last year, with the state budget cuts, I took a 10% reduction. So I think roughly 223,000. And based on what we spent last time, yes, we have $40,000 within that budget to spend on the plan. And especially as you point out with reduced travel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Matt. My thoughts are, I think it's really important to have this public portal. For one, other legislators who aren't on the committee can be participating and not feel like they're not being able to have a voice. I also feel like personally, the public, whether they choose to use it all the way through or not, will keep this transparent and give us, you know, the believability or the, trustworthiness of people being able to be a part of the process. So I'm highly in favor, especially now knowing we have one.
Representative Bonner.
I just saw the hand. Thanks.
All the way at the end, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman. Just a little bit more information since I'm new to this process as well. If we do have a public option, is there any opportunity to provide feedback to members of the public and maybe submit a plan, say it's off by 20 or 30%? Is there any opportunity to just kind of say, oh, try again, or here are the potential issues, so that we can kind of be a two-way street and it's automated, that we can inform the public as well as take their input. And that just wondering about technology, but that's a possibility. That could also help staff prioritize which plans they're going to do a little work on and maybe which ones will be voted on.
Well, and ultimately, if we put it up to a legislator to review that and put it forward under their name, I would assume we could send out an email to all legislators saying, here's the process. If a constituent comes to you to present a plan that you work with them on, you're ultimately responsible to make sure they meet the guidelines before, we bring you up to sit in front of us and get to do what we do. That.
Mr. Chairman, my question was a technical question. I just like to answer.
Sure,
Mr. Chairman and Senator, so my understanding is that we will develop a set of FAQs for the public to use. But what I don't want LSO to get in the business of is judging public plans on whether they meet certain criteria or not. And here's my rationale for that is, we only draft bills for legislators. We don't provide that service to the public. I think that's the one area I'm concerned about that could lead to too much staff time on the public portal. But if someone submitted a plan through the public portal and then you decided you wanted to to develop that plan further, then LSO would work with you as a legislator to develop that plan further. But Michael wants to add on to that. So, Mr. Slick.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Boomer, we had a slight demonstration of this in the recent training with Aptitude. Individuals with the public portal will have basically 3 options for submitting a plan. They can email it, so they could email their proposed plan to a legislator. If the committee chooses to have a legislator sponsor the plan, they can post the plan on the portal site so that anyone in the public can view it, and they can submit it to the custodian of the data, which would be LSO, and we can either pass that along to the committee or hold that plan for whoever needs to review it prior to posting. So there are multiple ways in which that plan can become publicized outside of just giving everything to LSO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to follow up, that same demonstration also it told us that we could create our own, whatever our criteria is, so our guiding principles, whatever it is, most of those are already set in the system. And so you have to meet these certain criteria or guideline minimum, or it won't submit. So you have to meet these certain parameters prior to it even taking all the information and submitting. So just like any form that you're filling out, if you don't fill out the required portion of the form, it won't go. So you have to put in the minimum. So that's one of the things that we talked about at redistricting summit is what do we want versus what the capacity already has. And because it's really expensive if we add in something that they don't already have. But most of our guiding principles, from my understanding, was they're already there. So it's just whatever else we may want, like statewide, regional, something like that. And they have the capability.
And once there are plans uploaded, I mean, I think some people want to do the whole state, but most people will say 80% of the state's done, I don't care. Let me focus on my 20 and move these around. Yeah. Senator.
Mr. Chairman, that's where the region falls in so well, because you can let them play with regions, and then you're only messing with an edge. And Representative Duncan's correct. They said basically it's got to deal that you've got to snap it in, or it won't let the plan spin. So if it's going to be 19,500 plus or minus 5%, that'll be in there, and they won't be able to submit one that's way out of variance. So.
Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, what did we do last time for the public? How much should we do for them last time we went through this?
Mr. Robert.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Blackburn. I mean, to the extent that there is an incredible amount of public outreach. Every plan that was developed was put on our website so folks could view it. We did not have the actual public portal last time. It was pretty new, still had just been developed for Idaho. It was actually about twice as much as it is now too. So we didn't have that capability last time.
Yep. Did the public submit maps or numbers to us that we looked at?
Mr. Chairman, the public would offer suggestions at meetings throughout the state on what a redistricting plan should look like. And then a lot of time members of the committee or other legislators would then work off of those plans to develop their own plans with LSO.
So I guess this immediate question, do we all feel comfortable having a public portal? I mean, there are free trials out there that people could make maps, and it would be burdensome on LSO to take those shape files or however they come in and reformat them, which is a waste of staff time in some cases. Does that equate out to 40,000 in the cost? Is my ultimate question. Senator Driscoll.
I'll make it easy for you because I think it's worth your time. I'll make a motion to spend the 40,000. Public portal.
Seconded by Duncan. Yes, since we're spending money, it should be a public portal. Is there discussion on the motion? And we're sure it's 40,000 exactly, give or take $5. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Case.
I'm going to push back just a little bit. originally kind of thought about this. And thought it sounded like a good idea, because I thought that's what we did last time. But it turns out that's not what we did last time. We asked the plans to be sponsored by legislators. That's kind of the way bills happen. I think it's most respectful of the process and step. And the public will still be able to use the plan viewer and make their own, see how they can make their own plans. It's just that we're hung up on this. I feel like we're kind of hung up on something that maybe has the wrong name in a way, but it's really going to be staff intensive and doesn't add that much more capability that people will actually use.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I think just the opposite is true. Is if I'm bringing a plan that's an incomplete plan, that guy's draft on napkin and I take it to LSO, they've got to put it through the viewer or somebody does. If they're allowed under this thing, they send me the shape file, I look at it, I'm actually the de facto staff that makes the first call, take shop another legislature if they don't like me. But I'm the one that makes the call, and if it makes sense, then I probably do go to LSO and say, let's look at a change, which I would. But I think it's a saving. I think that the real staff burden is me sending an email every other day saying, let's move this line 3 blocks or 6 blocks for me and submit it back to me. Let's let them do it online and submit the shape file to me. And then let me do it instead of letting LSO. It also takes them off the hook being partisan on how it falls. It leaves them dealing with legislation.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question. If we go with the rule that if you want to submit a plan, you have to go through the legislature. Do we need then the public portal, or does that eliminate the need for the public? I'm unclear.
Director Obrecht.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, Senator, the question was if plans get submitted on our plan viewer have to go through a legislator to be developed. If you went with that rule, no, you would not need the public portal because the public themselves, without going through a legislator, would not be able to have a plan on the plan viewer. Now, what the committee did last time too was when someone would bring a plan, they would go ahead and vote to have that put on the plan viewer and put in to Maptitude, even if they didn't want to sponsor it. They just put it out there for public discussion.
Senator Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, since this is a new technology, all I heard is motions to go ahead and move forward with it. We haven't had a discussion as to how we're going to process the information, which I think is potentially a separate discussion. Maybe it's an amendment to this current motion, and that's an open question. We're going to have staff deal with all the input that comes in, or is going to be automatically diverted to the legislator from that county. There's lots of ways we can deal with that and save staff time. And just to my mind, those are two separate but related issues, whether we have that capability or not. The second question is how do we handle it? How do we manage both of them?
So, LSO, do you feel we have a solid understanding of the benefits versus the 40,000 that we get? Or do we need to take a couple weeks and maybe have a summary of what is gained with a public portal versus what we could do internally, working with our constituents and bringing plans forward? I'm not exactly sure what the benefit for the 40,000 is that we get right now. And if you know, maybe, yeah, what's the benefit of the public portal to the public that they don't have to? I mean, there's 7 free software things right now. If they go into Maptitude, in your opinion, what do we get for it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, again, this is just in my opinion. Michael might have more to add to this. But I mean, from a public perspective, what they would have is a tool on the Wyoming State Legislature's website, which they could then use in the same software we're using to draw our plans, to develop those plans, and then have the ability to, maybe not be all that tech savvy and still share those plans with legislators. That's the benefit. And also develop plans without the need to go through a legislator as an intermediary. I have no idea how much will be used or not used. It's hard to tell on this thing. I know this in Idaho, that number, the 350, I think 300 of those were congressional plans. You could bet most of them were out of state. So, so how much it'll be used in Wyoming for, one congressional district, I don't know. I do have a fear that using GIS software is not the most intuitive process ever. And I have a fear that it'll lead to frustration, and there's no one else to call but us to get help with that frustration at that point in time.
Okay, further discussion or question, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So clarification on if we didn't do the public portal and the maptitude, you kept talking about, you guys were talking about the viewer. So explain to me, if I were the public, I go in, do I go into maptitude and create whatever I want, but it's just not savable? Is it emailable? What, I'm not understanding the viewer because we didn't get any of that conversation at the summit.
Okay. Representative Duncan, on our website currently, we actually run the plan viewer. When you go to look for locate my legislative function, that is the plan viewer.
Okay.
But what it'll be is, if you developed a plan for Goshen County or for whatever region Goshen County will be in, it would go, you would work with Michael or Danielle or Beth to develop that, or Josh, potentially Josh. And then that plan, once you were happy with it and you wanted the public to view it, that would go into our plan viewer as Duncan plan number 1 for region 3. And then the people would be able, the public and any other legislator would be able to pull up that plan from the library of plans submitted to be able to view it. And what would happen a lot of times is county clerks would get together with legislators from their area, also other county officials, municipal officials, interested members of the public, party officials would get together with legislators, and they would develop plans and then work with LSO, either sending us the shaped file or just telling us, hey, we want this line drawn here. And we would then make changes to either existing plans or development plans. And by the end, I mean, we have a plan library of dozens of plans to choose from that resulted in one plan being sponsored, statewide plan by the corporations committee.
Yep, follow it up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as a follow-up, if we were to decide, because that sounds very labor intensive for LSL. If we were to use and put out there a free plan, do we know which ones work to easily overlap or work with the maptitude, or those that don't? And perhaps maybe we pick one public that would work to recommend or have a link.
Mr. Sway.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, and this gets to kind of the scenario in Oklahoma. So I reached out to NCSL, and they generally are tracking 3 main public, free public software. Oklahoma, they told me to talk to Oklahoma because Oklahoma had used one of them. And what Oklahoma did was basically say, here's a free resource, you can all use it. What I did not get is how difficult it was to bring into the systems they were using. The positives or pluses and minuses of this is that they also set up their procedural criteria somewhat differently than we've been discussing here, where they basically said anyone can use that, but if they're going to submit a plan, they have to do the whole state. So they only got nine or 10 plans submitted through their process. So the one thing I wanted to note is that there's the technical issue, then there's the procedural issue. That's what Senator Bono was getting to. Technically, utilizing the public portal for maptitude, we know basically everything is compatible. Everything that is submitted by the public can come into our system. The other thing is that that can also be used for us to display the plans that the committee has outside the map, the plan viewer. The plan viewer is just not as dynamic or gives you the ability to do all the feedback that you wish. From a procedural point of view, it's really up to this body, this committee, on how you wish for those plans to be submitted, whether it's on the portal, whether it's drawn by hand, whether it's sponsored by legislators. Those are kind of the two sides where I think we are most concerned with this in terms of staff time is how many are we going to get and how labor intensive is it going to be to process it either here on our computers or through the portal and at least diverting those to the proper eyes to see to sponsor.
Mr. Chairman, over. And I think we had a figure on it. What would happen if we allocated another, say, $10,000 for a help desk from Maptitude? I remember they have a line, so rather than having you guys answer the questions, let them answer some of those, or go ahead and develop us a FAQ deal. Because really, all I'm doing by trying to do the 40,000, I want to be really greedy. I want to use your time. I don't want the public to burn up all your time while we're trying to do this. And I also want the public, for the idea of transparency, to participate. They come up with phenomenal ideas that we don't see first blush, and I think they're going to come with some splits within regions that probably we didn't see. And so I think we've got a way around it. But part of it is how do we really most efficiently conserve your guys' time so you're really focused on getting this plan and getting it done right.
So I think the question, Senator Boner.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like I said, first time for me going through this process, certainly heard stories about county clerks playing a significant role in coming to draw the lines as well. It seems to me that perhaps not the entire burden needs to fall on LSO, especially once we divide the state up into regions and counties. So just wondering what role the county clerks may play in this process, especially since we're talking about saving LSO time. It seems like they have their own capabilities. Now, I guess I'm a little bit curious about what that may look like when it comes to coming, especially with regional plans.
County clerks would love to draw the plans for us and submit them.
And from a practical perspective, like I said, they do have a lot of input and a lot of insight, so it might be best to get everybody around here.
Welcome back. Thoughts on how helpful we'd like to be?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Boner. Obviously, we think we've got the best plan. And so we do intend, we've already contracted with a person who's really familiar with GIS. And as soon as we get some real granular data, having something to bring, hopefully to this committee to say, here's what we think could work. My understanding is the last reapportionment, that's what the county clerks did, brought something forward. We intend to do something very similar, which, and to your point, Senator Boner, I think that regional plan is so much easier to do that. We can focus on these corners as opposed to, so if we have a problem in one portion of the state, then we can turn our focus and expertise that way. And so, again, hopefully we'll play integral piece. We do intend to have some sort of plan that we bring forward. It just, as soon as we get the data and our contractor is able to work on it, we'll be happy to have that to you.
All counties have the same GIS program?
Mr. Chairman, or whatever you have to get them. No, they don't. Each has some form, but not the same. My understanding is they're all compatible though with the Maptitude data.
Every county.
That's my understanding, Mr. Chairman.
So instead of legislators bothering us, so we can have good Dr. County Clerk.
I think I might have, Mr. Chairman, 22 sets of eyes burning a hole in the back if I said yes. But I know that each county clerk was willing to engage with the public and really talk about these issues. And so, again, we are eager to be a resource for you. And if it's the boots on the ground that help develop a good plan that works well for the state of Wyoming, absolutely. We're there to help.
So committee, there's still a motion on the table Further discussion, the motion that this is the meeting to do it, or for the City of Blackburn and then Senator Gibson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this would be a question for staff. If we don't spend this 40,000, I guess now it's up to 50. So
I never remember that.
40 or 50,000 dollars, whatever the amount ends up being. Without spending that money, the other legislators off this committee won't be able to make the maps and do the things that we're able to do. That, am I understanding that correctly?
Director of Rec.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Blackburn, no, it's just like bill drafting. Any legislator can ask LSO to draft whatever redistricting plan they want. All my legislators, that's how we worked it last time. And so, and we've got double the licenses that we had last time because of the short amount of time we've got to work with here. And Mr. Chairman, just to clarify for the committee, so I understand the universe of what it looked like to go through LSO for all plans last time. That's how we've always done it. We've never done one of these plan viewers. So I know we can handle that work if we did it like we did it 10 years ago. But I also think we can probably handle the work if there's a plan viewer as well to let the public. But here's my caveat on that. The public's got to be able to submit whatever plan they want. And we can't set guidelines or parameters on what plans. One, they might not want to submit the plan that the committee guidelines are. And of course, the legislature might adopt a plan that's adverse to the committee guidelines as well. And two, and selfishly, if they can submit any plan they want, then it wouldn't require us explaining to them why their plan doesn't conform to the committee guidelines.
But it ultimately would require someone, legislator, chairman, to review all of those plans and say, these are the ones we want to bring and talk about at a meeting. Because if we get 60 plans, 40 of them don't even fit, somebody has to be gatekeeper that says, we want them publicly presented, want to discuss them and be time efficient.
And Mr. Chairman,
You don't want to make a
that's
call without
exactly
saying.
what Idaho said is the committee was free to give what weight to those plans they so choose.
Mr. Chairman, back to Director Albrecht, back to what you're talking about, I think there's a big difference between me sitting on my computer at home and roughing in a plan for a district and sending you an email that says County Road 39 to the Belfouche River back across. And that's where I see the difference in your time is if I can sit and gerrymander these lines or whatever, however you want to use the terminology. Well, I use it because it actually is the way it works, is you move these lines to make them fit. And I think the public's the same, is some of them will wear out rapidly and quit doing it because they find out how hard it is, but other ones potentially can come up with really good plans. It's frustrating, and I'm, for one, you guys know how many emails I send you asking questions because I know how busy you are. And I would spend personally myself probably dozens of hours on some of these districts, but I'm certainly not going to send you an email and tell you how to do it that way. So to me, I place great weight, and I think for transparency, develop plans. $40,000 is a cheap investment. And of course, you're still doing the same work and we spent the money. But I think it's a good spend of money to give the people to do it. It's an amazing idea. See, I look at Senator Scott's plan. I'd drawn one out similar with yours. It's amazing what people come up with that doesn't become apparent to you. And so for me, more minds we've got that can build plans that fit, the better off we are, and the 40 is a cheap spend.
We're still in discussion of public forum, 40,000. Chairman Willis.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to have a little clarification on the GIS at the county level, because I think that has some relevancy. It's entirely different in every county. Many of them resides in the assessor's office, and they're using it for pictometry and land ownership. It doesn't necessarily have that next level of data. Not all counties have GIS that can manipulate the census block data. So to have the clerks most engaged, I don't know if relying on the local GIS is a good avenue, because there's a more sophistication and less sophistication in the GIS. They have some access, but I don't want to leave the impression that the county GIS has the same data that would be available through here. So I just wanted to offer that clarification if that is helpful to the conversation, all, Mr. Chairman. Jim Willix, President of the County Commissioners Association. For the record, I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the time.
Perfect. While you're there, though, Senator Case, what's the question for you? No, not for any other. All right, thank you. Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, we ought to be careful if we use the word gerrymander. Okay? Because, here's the Wikipedia version. I'm sure there's a better version, but gerrymandering is a practice intended to establish an unfair political advantage, particular party or group, like manipulating. So I don't think that's what we mean.
Thank you. I retract all my
Yeah.
privacy.
I think we can use words like manipulate or change, draw, but I just don't think we want to say gerrymander. And this committee has been, the work of this committee, in the time I've been associated with it, this is a long time, Senator Scott too, has never been criticized at the committee level for engaging in party manipulation. There's 2 times that there has been plans developed by the committee that were changed on before, and that's fair enough, but it's a sensitive subject. Thank you. Good job.
Well said, my fault.
Still on discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, quick question. If we chose to follow the same guidelines or a policy like we do for interim committees, subjects, topics at the end of the year, and you have to have a legislator sponsor that topic, can the public portal be used in that way where a public creates their map, and when they submit it, it would automatically go to a particular legislator so that we would cut down on any contact with you?
Mr. Swain, they could put in their address and automatically goes to their current legislator who would get to choose whether or not to represent that plan.
Mr. Chairman, I know that they can provide it by email or so forth, but I don't know if that requires additional programming to actually set it up to go to a specific person. I believe you can, we might be able to, we haven't gotten into all the details of that particular function. But I would expect we could maybe load in an address book and you could choose for it to go to someone, but I don't know that for sure.
All right, did everybody have their question? Not yet. Hey, Roberta Clausen, how are you? You're called upon.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for LSO concerning the clerks and our technology we're using. So if they all have different GIS systems, without the public portal, do they have some sort of access to have the same information with all the blocks that get in?
Ms. Langford, I assume you get the US Census data and the same data we get to utilize it. That be correct?
Mr. Chairman, Mary Langford, representing the County Clerks Association. The reason why we hire Rich Greenwood at Greenwood Mapping is so that we can use that data to submit the data to LSO. So we have a contractor that will do all that work for us. So we're good. And it's true. Our data is held differently in every county, but we've got it covered.
Further discussion on the question. All right, all in favor of the motion, let me make sure I see.
Is there any merit? Is there any merit in waiting till next week?
I was trying to let know, and we can always try again. So,
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Representative, go ahead.
Did you just call on me?
I did.
Thank you. I'm sure this question has been asked before, but I'm not sure I understood the answer. If we go ahead and approve this expenditure to purchase the public portal, can we still put some toll gates or some restrictions on what LSO has to handle with those, so that not every single whim of a public member of the public has to be reviewed by the LSO? Can we still decide who gets to really have plans considered that are worthy of consideration, or will every single plan have to be handled by the LSO?
So I can try to respond because I'm certain LSO doesn't want to make those decisions on which plan submitted they want to allow this committee to look at or not. It would ultimately either be up to the entire committee to review all of the plans that came in and decide if they wanted to individually bring them forward. If the co-chairman and I had to sit and look at them all and say, these, I'm not sure I want that responsibility. So that is a difficult question, because who makes the final call on which plans this committee would review and which aren't worthy, and are they all worthy, and would we take time? Or we put them in a packet all together and the committee could pull out one they like. Director Ober, do you have thoughts on that? You don't have to, I just want to check you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think you could do it a number of different ways. One is every plan could just go onto the website on our plan viewer library, and then anyone could look at the plan, any plan submitted on that library. The second one is, rather than having it submitted directly to the plan viewer, is it could just be emailed to the committee, and the committee could view those and then decide which one the committee wanted to put on the website.
As for amendment, dictates LSO does not help the public on the plan viewer, because I really don't want to spend time on it. I do think that Aptitude has the ability, if you want to sit read, to understand how to do it. So I will personally take the room amendment that says they're not going to help on it. That way, Matt and his crew doesn't have to say, I can't help you. He can say, it's part of what we brought forward, because this is really important to me, and it's important at this meeting. I think it's really time that we're timely about doing it. They're about to download it. If we're going to spend the money, I just soon get it up and let the public start working. I think you'll find when we talk to people down at the summit, there'll be a lot less plans submitted than you think if they have to actually fit in the puzzle. If you let them do incompletes, they'll send you all kinds of incompletes. But as we all know, everybody that's worked on it, to come up with an absolute plan that plugs in is not as easy as it looks. And a lot of them are going to get frustrated as well. And I really, really want the public to have the very best chance they have to have absolute put in redistricting. I think that mousetrap got to be adopted and look at it and have to go through a lot.
My ultimate concern then is they don't go to LSO, they go to their legislator, and then their legislator just goes to LSO, and you've actually just added another step for everybody. Ultimately, LSO will still have the workload. Question on the amendment, on the, great. The $40,000 to the public work.
I guess didn't have a second.
Okay, so the restate the amendment real fast. Chairman Driscoll. It's his own amendment. So it's a $40,000 public portal that the public cannot ask LSO for assistance. And is it Brenda Duncan as a second? You seconded the motion, so it's up to you. Yeah, okay. Ms. Creech, Mr. Swank.
Mr. Chairman, I did want to clarify in the, we have recently, their public portal will have some tutorial on it that would show them how to use the system. We were not provided the full tutorial on that, but I believe as Senator Driscoll says, there are resources available from Aptitude once that portal is set up, so that there would hopefully be less concern about how the public would be utilizing that particular portal.
All right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think this could be a good solution if there's not a problem with the optics of the LSO turning down people requesting help. And I think if we say, just make it clear that the LSO is not going to do it, but there are these other resources that's listed on the website. Just call your county clerk and are we the optics of not providing help to the public?
Mr. Chairman, I guess here's what I would ask. Let's go ahead and, and remove that and just see how much, people ask us for help. And because if it's not burdensome, I don't mind helping folks, navigate that plan. I would much rather help, a few people than have to tell one person, no, we can't help you. There's no resource to help you.
Senator Driscoll. Thank you. I will respectfully withdraw the second will. Mine is LSO doesn't provide help to the public anyway. If the public comes out and says, I want you to draft a bill, it's still got to come through one of us. And that's what co-chairman had to say. And that was my feeling was, we don't make you available to the public. And by the way, I'm not willing to share you. So for my end, it was just a redundant fact of what's there, but makes it more clear. So, but I'm willing to withdraw.
Yeah, let's just see if it's, if it's necessary.
Freeman Flitter on the motion. All those, or can do a hand raise. So, yeah. All those in favor of spending $40,000 of redistricting money on a public portal, no, please raise your hand.
Raise your other hand.
6. All those not in favor or opposed, raise your hand.
You just voted.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Representative Air, I didn't see your hand either way.
I voted for it.
For it. I guess you're spending 40,000 checks. Oh, Representative Clifford is online. Sorry, let me have their further video. Let me wait for the results of the vote there, Senator Scott, and see if Representative Clifford is with us. Representative Clifford, did you hear the motion?
Yes, I did.
You vote in favor or against it?
In favor. Favor?
Yeah. Carries, good. Motion carries. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a list of 4 motions I think we need to do today. I'm going to do them one at a time, but I want to. First, I'm going to want to move to use the regional approach. Second, I want somebody to move one of the regional approaches, and I think the committee is going to, whichever one gets moved, going to modify it. Between the two of them, come up with a better product. Third, we need to have a rule for how we calculate how many people have to be added to or subtracted from a region where we need to do that. And I'll make a motion on that. And fourth, we need to aggregate the census blocks into some intermediate level. I think maybe the voting districts level is going to be the appropriate one. But we need to have something between the county and the census block, because otherwise we have too many. So, Mr. Chairman, I do move that we use a regional approach to the district. Second.
Question.
So the motion is just that we eventually will break up, and this is a motion to do a regional approach to do redistricting. Any discussion on that motion? Question. Seeing none, and I know there's public comment online we'll get to. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. We're doing it by regions.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, there was a set of regions that was proposed by LSO, where in the presentation that was, but my sense is that let's use that sample of plan regions. And then I'm going to move to amend, but I'll move to use the LSO one that's in the book.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Before I get to LSO, I'm just, okay, Mr. Swank, go ahead, or Mr. Overett. You want to call him? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we actually did 3 potential regional plans, and they start on page 47 of.
I'm looking at the one on page 41.
And so while you're thinking about a committee, I'm likely to vote against the motion, and my vote would be that when we come back in 3 weeks is when we decide. We think we all agree we're going to regional. But I don't want to decide today on where those regions are, and I don't want to decide today on the 60-30 enshrined. So I think in about a week or two, we'll have the data in the map, and at our next meeting in 3 weeks, I think that would be the appropriate place to say, here's what the regions and however many counties are going to look like as we move forward, and that might be the appropriate place. And we can talk about the number of legislators and where those clean breaks are. I just tell you, I'm not ready today to say it's going to be 60-30 and it's going to be that map at a certain place. But I know there's motion table, so this regional on page 41. Page 47. I was seconded by Senator Neville. Further discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, in that plan, I would move that we separate Fremont County out as a separate region. They've got a special problem there with the voting district. They can be largely self-contained. We'll have to use some of their population elsewhere, I think.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so it's an amendment, and let me make
Well,
sure.
I'd love not to touch Fremont County, it'd be really nice, but Mr. Chairman, I think this is all just a little bit premature. A lot of us are just getting our heads around this, and the public's gotta come along. I don't want to force it down the public. I think we need to just say, we've got a regional approach. Here's some ideas, public, take a look at them, see what you think. We'll get back to us. We'll decide which of the paths to go down at our next meeting, and we give more direction. But I just think trying to settle all this right now is way premature. It would be efficient, but I think it wouldn't be inclusive of the public.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
If both chairmen, I think it would be wise to put this off the next meeting. I don't.
Senator Driscoll. I mean, that's what I think.
I just soon do it now, and here's why. Mr. Chairman, whatever we do is amendable or changeable. We've always done it that way. And to me, if we pick one of these plans and we put it out there, if there's a whole next meeting, we're certainly going to have a lot of people to talk about it. But when you really sit down and look at these regional plans, it's pretty stunning how solid this one falls in place to me. And I am happy for anyone else to do it, but we're under a time frame. The quicker we can get this moved in and get it done and get comments on it, better off we are. And to me, you put this out there, if it's got a whole next meeting, we'll amend it. This isn't, we're not moving this on to an amendment to the floor. This is always flexible, but it puts the public on notice. That's kind of what we're doing. They don't like it. We've done that many times. I like the idea of getting down the road on redistricting.
So let me ask the question of Ellis, because I don't quite understand A, where this plan came from, and B, in Region 9, how you can have 5 House reps and 2 senators, and where your extra district goes when everything else is an equal number around the Big Horn Basin. We're just going to have 29 senators and 60 reps. And we take chunks. I can't make that going forward work in my mind, but can you tell me where this map came from and who designed it?
Mr. Chairman, I did. And it was just, an attempt, Mr. Chairman, this is what we did 10 years ago, just like Senator Scott said, starting block of how the states seem to go together. And where the extra representative would need to come from, Mr. Chairman, is a combination of those people from the Big Horn Basin and whatever other contiguous area, be it Fremont County, Natrona County, or any other area that would be contiguous to the basin would be the extra district.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I'll propose an amendment. We've got to do it for that and the region A.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman, the first motion is to split Fremont County out. I think that'll make it a lot easier. We'll be able to deal with, we will have to give up some population. We'll be able to do that.
Senator Case.
I just want to come down to, these are pretty significant decisions. I'm not saying we're not going to go down that road. I wouldn't personally favor that. It makes it a lot easier on my end. But the public's not with us on this. They're going to be reviewing this. You know, we're going to be meeting again in 3 weeks, right? And they'll have the time to talk about and look at what those mean. That by that time, they'll actually be able to manipulate it a little bit and come back and they can look at the other proposals for regional plans. I don't know. I realize it's very short on time, but why would we get ahead of the public on this issue? This is the one where we have to be with the public and they have to. They will feel like we're forcing something down their throats. I think we just have to breathe a little bit, give them a chance to look at these things as a proposal and come back to our next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so everyone is right. That said, we as a committee has to take a lead. And we rely on this thing. That's our statutory duty and our obligation. That's what we're here to do. So I think it's appropriate for us to take the lead, but I also think it's appropriate for us to communicate to the public that this is the first day of our committee meeting. We're just trying to get something to work with and work to draft. This is not final product or outcomes. And we are taking the wisdom of 2 senators on this committee that have done this at least 4 times. So I look forward to changing, amending, and modifying this particular proposal before it's all said and done, and look forward to receiving the public's input and feedback on how we're doing it incorrectly, particularly from clerks, particularly clerk Freeze. And I know that you'll be receptive to hearing that feedback, but it really is just, I think, an effort to get something tangible in front of the committee to work forward.
I would say there's a significant change of our current legislative makeup if we're going and we're starting at, no offense to the LSO director, but having LSO design our plan, the committee, I just think it starts us off wrong. But Senator Bunner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at least from my perspective, I have engaged with my constituents on the possibility of at least the east side of the state. I guess the question is, with those on page 47, regions 8 and 9 seem to be the one in question where we are more unsure about. So the possibility of combining those 2 regions with the understanding that we have to probably divvy those up at some point. Maybe we're just not there yet. I think the east side of the state, including Sherman County, Johnson, Sheridan County, those are a little bit easier to deal with. Maybe that's just my perspective from being from the east side of the state, but perhaps it's premature to make a decision about, say, Fremont County being its own region. It's premature to say Big Board Basin is going to be dealt with in this particular way. And those are the challenges we have before us as a city given the circumstances. So perhaps, I don't know, like get some feedback from folks who are more experienced. Perhaps we can move forward with a modified version of the proposed plan on page 47, just combining regions 8 and 9 and saying that we need more discussion as to how we're going to divvy those up. So that just my
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, if we adopt these regions, we are going to have to move some population between the regions. Bighorn Basin is not large enough for its base senators and 6 House districts. It's close, but it's not. Fremont County has some margin to give up. We'll need to, for 2 senators and 4 representatives, we'll have to switch a little population from our Harvard district to the Tetons of Lincoln United District in order to stay. So we will have to make some modifications. I think the way it's drawn, I think in the eastern regions, that's not going to.
And I mean, I'll be very blatantly honest. I'm being selfish. My county because there's 10.5 legislators, and I'm not ready to say we're only getting 10 in this plan. So on the current 60-30 model, and that's enough reason for me to not box in my county from day one. I know we'll get to, turf wars eventually, but it's kind of, day one, I'm not ready to give out half a person. I mean, Lerman County grew, and sorry, that's what it is, and I'm not ready to say that growth gets negated from day one, and we're gonna fit all of us in the box. But, all right, discussion on the motion, still on the table. All right, all in favor, starting with the map on page 47, to start working forward from at our next meeting, please raise your hand. Looking at Representative Fair, Representative Clifford, raise your hand, not seeing it. All of those opposed, raise your hand. Four, five, 6, 7. All right, that motion has failed. And Senator Scott, Ms. Herman wants to publicly comment really bad. We take a quick break and hear from legal and voters.
Okay, and then I do want to come back to
that.
Things on the numbers.
Okay, I think it'll be a good break for the committee to hear from legal and voters. Ms. Herman, the floor is yours.
She looks a lot different.
Thank you so much, and apologize for being late in the process, being sort of a coda to everything else here, but and a lot of some of the stuff has been said before, so I apologize, but I will be brief. To start out with, I would like to support what Senator Case said about this body and its various iterations has had a good reputation at avoiding the temptation of gerrymandering, maybe because it wasn't necessary, but surely they've been good about being even-handed as far as political parties go. So I have every confidence that you guys will do the same thing this time around. I followed you during the day. I don't know if you've disposed of the county plan idea, but I want to address it real briefly. And I understand the lure of using counties as a logical, if not numerical, way of sending representatives to the Capitol. But I wonder how often that is true enough to override the one person, one vote. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself, Marguerite Herman, League of Women Voters, which I'm going to invoke for the proportional representation, which is very foundational to us. So I'll resume. And we already talked about Lincoln County being very different from top to bottom. I will remind people, recall the difficulty of counties to come together for consolidated school districts. So even the school districts couldn't get together within a county. There's that much different culture orientation, however you want to put it. So county lines are not always rational themselves. The League of Women Voters considers proportional representation fundamental to representative government, to democracy. So we make that principle primary. And at the risk of overstating this, I'll paraphrase Vince Lombardi to say, it is not the most important thing, it is the only thing. Practically speaking, it may be easy to fudge a little here and there, moving people over this line and that line, as was kind of mentioned before, a couple of hundred here, a couple hundred there. No harm, no foul, but there is harm and foul because we know that deficit of population ripples across a region and sometimes across the whole state. You may try to contain shifting within a region, so good luck with that. It is little comfort that the legislature may be able to skate through without being sued, but that is cold comfort. The principle is single, whether it's single member, multi-member, it's one person, one vote is really fundamental. We are sympathetic to legislators who live in sparsely populated areas of the state, so their districts are large and unwieldy. Mentioned Senate District 1 and Carbon County. But again, there is the principle of one person, one vote, and no room in our wonderful capital to add many seats and districts. Thank you for your work on this task, which I have watched over the past, I think, 3 redistricting sessions, which is completely at the center of a representative form of government. It's a hard job made even harder by your commitment to consider public input and the short time frame. You have an expert team in the LSO. Sounds like you have a good set of software to help the public understand and maybe contribute to the process. And the League of Women Voters of Wyoming is eager to support you with efforts to explain the principles and options available to the legislature as you go around the state and try to engage the public. So I just wanted to offer that thing about the proportional representation, and then just offer if the league can do anything to help you in helping to orient the public, take public comment, explain, we stand ready to do that. So thank you, and I'll answer any questions if you have any at this late date. I'm sure you all want to pack up and go home.
Questions for the league? Not seeing any. Thank you, Marguerite. Glad I got to you. Senator Scott, floor is yours again.
Mr. Chairman, we need to aggregate the census block data at some intermediate level between the census block county. Mr. Chairman, my motion is that we ask LSO to do an aggregation at the voting district level with the ability to come to the chairman if it proves that that doesn't prove to be a practical one, come to a chairman and select a different, whether it's census block or you had a third one in there. But Mr. Chairman, that's my motion, is to try the voting district and see if that works.
Is there a second to that motion? I'm worried it's just a little premature because I haven't seen it all mapped out yet, and we had lost 30,000 census blocks. Anybody want to second the motion? Not seeing so this time, Scott. And your fourth one was on population deviation, though?
And if you want, we can deal with that. That's tied up with, you pick a region and then you have to figure out how many people actually move into that region. That's tied up in that. So
We don't want to do the population deviation today.
Yeah.
And then if you regions after, you go to breaks or regional.
Yeah.
And then try to make your fit.
We can do that. I suspect we can come back with a regional plan that will deal with the objections.
All right, committee, we're generally an open discussion. The two major things I want to finish before we head out today are I feel like some guidelines that we kind of agree to follow, and maybe we can with those for the next meeting, to keep them in your head. And then B, I really would like to work on some type of preliminary meeting schedule. I don't believe we're going to meet before our September 2nd meeting, 2nd and 3rd. Your districting, I believe right now is scheduled for the afternoon of the 3rd. But as we're finalizing the corporation's agenda, that could change, but it will be sometime 2nd or 3rd, as of now in Sheridan. But I'm not sure at this point if we want to go ahead and devote a day a week on Zoom for a couple of hours in the morning. We want to try to schedule the rest of September. I'd like to get at least 1 or 2 more meetings on the calendar, and then maybe after our September 3rd meeting, we can plan it out better. So I think we talked 6 months ago about everybody should be generally free for the next 2 months, right? Because we all knew this was coming. Did that change for anyone to the point you're gone for a week or 2 for the next 3 months? Are you going to miss my Sheridan meeting? Are your Sheridan meeting? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Case, lead us.
with respect to meetings and in the future, we have other committee business to do. We have some, at least the next committee meeting is mapped out. We would devote part of that meeting to redistricting, of course, but the regional meetings that we may or may not have, and I'm hoping we'll have some purpose in person. They're not actionable meetings. They're to go out and listen to the public. So it's not necessary that we necessarily have a quorum there. We could divide up the workload. We could have meetings in different parts of the state at the same time. We also have the layer of Zoom that we can effectively use. I hope we do a combination of both. So it might be a little unwieldy to try to schedule out with everybody here, but you might do things like have you propose some meeting dates, and even I think our chairs don't have to be there for every meeting. I think folks can do it kind of on their own on a regional basis, and you get your rest of your legislators together. So I don't know if that would work, but it gives us a little bit more flexibility. One way that could proceed is kind of if the chairman or the draft kind of where they'd like to achieve meetings around the state, combination of in-person and Zoom, and then allow the committee members to kind of volunteer who could be there, who would be willing to travel. Is that workable, Mr. Director? I mean, it's easier than sending the whole committee to every meeting, believe me. I don't think we want to do that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we probably, not send the whole team there.
Right.
Is there a feeling from the committee on how many in-person meetings you'd like to have public come testify in front of us and with us and work collaboratively, and how many kind of Zoom meetings? I mean, it is different than 10 years ago. We don't apply the state plan to 15 cities. But I do think it's important to have some in-person meetings where we can really sit down face to face and at a larger group. Yeah, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, we voted to use a regional approach. It's clear there are going to be 8 or 9 regions, I think. I think we got to think about having a public meeting in each one of them and invite the local legislators to attend as well. And so I think we need to settle what they are, and then we can try to schedule those in the next month after that.
I agree.
So do we need to schedule any meetings now for September, or just everybody's kind of on call for September 3rd? We'll have a good idea of when. I mean, I assume we're gonna have a couple in September still. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How about this? Between now and with, pick a date, we all kind of touch base with our local areas, talk to our other partner representatives and senators, and have us all between now and whatever date make some sort of contact with our county clerks, commissioners, and our legislators, and do some sort of public, check-in. And then we'll have a feedback, hopefully before our next meeting. We'd have feedback to know, hey, what do you think of this region idea? Do you see any issues, any problems? That way we can come back with an educated direction.
I think ultimately, I'd like to know from people in those counties, if we go regional, which other counties do you feel your county most closely associated with, communities of interest? Maybe in Fremont, we know there's going to be an issue. We assume you're going to go in the basin, and the basin is going to come into you. What does that look like with a district, and then what does sublet look like? Where's it picking up people from Teton, from Carson, from LaBarge? And so maybe those kind of general conversations on people, we can get the map together, and we're going to probably have the conversation on regionalizing on September 3rd. And I think at that point, we say, these are the regions, but I want people to come informed of, yeah, if we're doing 60-30, maybe this map on page 47 is the map we'll use. But if anybody wants to present a different version of what regionalization would look like, I can draw a map that I did earlier, that Campbell, Kirk West, and Converse, and Niobrara region, and then Laramie, Goshen Platte. And so that's really where I'm hoping the next meeting is we have different regionalized plans come before this committee, and this committee then does sides on, okay, here's our regions, and then we can kind of keep going every week or two on further grinding down.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Kaye.
I think you're definitely on something, and Representative Duncan has made a good suggestion. For example, in the case of Fremont County, we probably also want to include our tribal friends. And you could have the county legislators, but we'd also probably invite folks from the basin who are part of the team right now and talk about how that might happen. So I would hope that, Mr. Director, that the members of this committee who want to go to other regional meetings, I mean, there's got to be a limit on it, but we could accommodate folks to come over, spend the night, or whatever it takes for travel to go join these regional meetings. And, seems like that'd be most efficient. I think we could probably do that, have an initial meeting in September for example, Fremont County, and maybe other people could do the same thing. So that after the meeting in Sheridan, we can make some progress.
I think everyone knows September is usually a fairly busy legislative month with meetings. I know we're all on different committees, so I don't want to overlap. Maybe that is the appropriate way to just kind of plan regional meetings with parts of the committee. I'm just looking at the calendar for September, trying to find a date that we can all meet for half a day or kind of hold. Just in case we need a date. Like Wednesday the 15th. September. I'm looking through all your task forces or committees for the 23rd, 24th. So maybe that'll be the plan. And yeah, if everybody's kind of maybe tentatively holds the 15th for a Zoom meeting, a check-in meeting. We can pick if somebody has times they can't make it. You know, it'll be fun at judiciary thing. And so that's, I guess, my ask, my hope is that everybody in this committee, members of the public, if you have a regionalized plan that you believe, if it's 60-30, 58-29, 65, 66-33, whatever it is, and which region you propose, I would assume that would be the big conversation at our next meeting, is how the regions are going to look, and then kind of just keep chipping away at it. Are there other things we need to discuss at this meeting? We want to go back through some of the rules and guidelines. Does everybody feel we don't have to agree to the rules and guidelines, but that's the format. We're kind of moving forward, keeping the 2012, 2011, 2012 guidelines in mind. I don't want to be the guy that goes ahead and nobody's with me. So I'm anytime. Well, I don't want to officially adopt them all without some more conversation and thoughts. My problem. I think we should be prepared to make decisions. You want to? We can do it today if you want.
I'll say.
Okay, so the motion for it would be hey, Danielle, could you pull that back up for the guiding principle for 2012? I believe we did as amended. So number 5 will come off the 60-30 mandate for now, right? I assume when we figure it out, we'll put that number back on. Are we still going to keep the range of deviation not to exceed 10%?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay for now? Okay.
Yeah.
County boundaries, census blocks. Not sure I like the majority of the population of each county, so at least one. Did we?
Oh, we moved it up.
Okay.
Yeah, we did.
Do we add anything on? Sorry, I must have too much one. All right,
So, and Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, I think that principle number 6, consideration should be given to 2 contiguous House districts in the Senate district. I want to be clear that I view that as not prohibiting multi-member districts. Partly because of the word consideration, but I think it leads to the thinking that you could have 4 House districts, 2 Senate districts. I don't think that's prohibited by this. If anybody disagrees, let's have it out now, but I'd like to keep multi-member districts on the table. For now.
if we do a regionalized approach within that region, depending how
Still
it
works.
still works.
I think it's complementary, but I just want the public and members of the committee to not think just because we have adopted 6, that precludes us from further consideration of multi-member districts. So I intend to bring them back more. Okay.
So recorded. All right, so the motion on the table is.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. I actually had this question when the county clerks were testifying, but I'll ask it now. Do we want to consider anything about the notion that the county clerk brought up regarding the size of districts being so small that an individual voter could be identified? Should that be one of these principles? Is that worth considering at all?
Senator Case, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think we have to do that, and I think that goes without saying. I don't, Representative Mayor, I don't think we need to make that a principle. I think we're actually all bound by that.
Okay.
The secrecy of the ballot and not identifying. I think we're good on that.
Okay.
Discussions. Mr. Swank. or Mr. Obrecht, or Miss, oh, you're reaching for the mic. I thought you were pointing at the director. Mr. Swank.
Mr. Chairman, can you clarify which principles have been removed?
5 and 3.
Okay, thank you.
5 and 3B. All right, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Great, that motion carries. We have principles. I'll do a recap at the end. Further discussion on anything you think the committee should be pursuing before our meeting in 3 weeks. That we talked about getting regionalization plans together, looking at the maps. LSO will let the committee know and distribute magnitude when the data is placed, could be by the end of the week. And then also I want to make sure LSO, we're going to put out a frequently asked questions or a notification to our colleagues, all 90 of us, about what the plan is moving forward on how magnitude works. And I'm not sure what I'm directing you. I'm directing you to make sure all of our colleagues feel like they're informed and have an idea of where we're going forward. President Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did we want to take the step of we discussed about the maps needing to be submitted, like in following what we would do for internet topics?
I guess Director or Mr. Swank. So we agreed to this public portal. Not sure how long that's going to take to put into place, but assumedly by February or what month? September 2nd and 3rd meeting, we'll be able to present that, I think, publicly, and here's how to access it. Do we believe that'll be capable in 3 weeks?
We'll try to, Mr. Chairman, we're just not sure.
Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered if it would be prudent for us individually to, between now and our next meeting, to try and reach out to our local officials and likely interested parties to see how interested they'd be in holding, putting together a meeting, if not in every county, then in every area. Just to maybe, and then come back and we can individually report to the committee as a whole, well, here's what works for certain, time frames for other people, so on and so forth. I mean, I think it'd be great to hold a meeting in every county. I don't think that's a practical, but just something to consider.
County clerks, you're planning on being with us every step of the way. So if you digest the data and look, I mean, you have obvious communications with your commissioners, with your other county elected officials, probably your mayors and city councils, and you will be looking to you to say, hey, when we regionalize, our county probably would prefer to be with this county, but maybe not this county. I'm just waiting for Washington and Hot Springs to come hand in hand together, saying, join us. That'll be fun. All right, committee, further discussion, questions, testimony, thoughts. Ms. Spiegler, you're in the waiting room. You didn't raise your hand, but let me see if we have one more public comment today. Any other comments from the public about how they'd like this committee to start pursuing our tasks before the next meeting in 3 weeks? All right. So there's no closing comments from the committee, anything from LSO. We'll consider this meeting adjourned and see you all in Sheridan on the 2nd and 3rd of September. Fill out your